G'day guys, welcome back to another episode. In this episode we're going to be showing you exactly how we service at Toyota Prado, a simple 5,000 kilometre service, so just done the Gibb River Road. So it's going to be pretty filthy under there, so let's bloody get into it. So, before we get into this, there's a few things I need to address. Firstly, the elephant in the room, you're probably thinking, whose bloody shed are you in? So we've made our way down the coast, back to Mum and Dad's house in Bunbury here. We're going to be here for the next 6 weeks due to some weddings happening, which has been really handy because there's 4 happening in 6 weeks, so they're all coinciding pretty close together. And then we're going to continue on our ventures down the south coast, so during the summer season, and it should be pretty warm and nice. Yeah, can't wait to do that, but we've got to get through these weddings first before we head off, so I thought today would be a pretty good opportunity to show you guys my simple 5,000k service. So, full disclaimer, I'm not an expert, I'm not a mechanic, but this is just the way I've been servicing cars for pretty much since I owned a car. I've been doing all the servicing myself. I had a 120 Prado before this one, so I know the 1KZ engine semi-well, and I know this D4D engine sort of a little bit better. So in this video, we're going to be showing you exactly how you service the car, 5,000 kilometre service. And with that, it's up to everyone's total preference, essentially. So everyone services the car differently, and everyone does different intervals in the way they service the car, like filters, oils, etc. So for me personally, I run different oil every 5,000 Ks, so I'm changing the oil every 5,000 Ks no matter what, even on the road. So I've done all the filters 5,000 Ks ago, so this is going to be the small service. But because we have been on the Gibb River Road, I'm also going to be doing the air filter. I did run a pre-filter on the snorkel head, little red filter you might see people running, and that did stop a lot of dust getting into the air filter, but I'm still going to change it. And then I've had a look and it is pretty clean, but I'm still going to keep that old one as a spare just because of how clean it is. That's another little handy tip. Always carry spares just in case you get stuck, and if you have one, good on ya, get you out of trouble. If you don't, you're in trouble. So always carry spares where you can, guys. I'll also be doing the oil filter, which I normally do on every 5,000 kilometre service. So normally I do oil and filter, and then I normally do air filter, fuel filter, and secondary fuel filter every 10,000 Ks. Even though the secondary fuel filter is rated for 20,000 plus Ks, I still change it. So it's all about preventative maintenance, guys, and if you do these sort of little checks and changes before you hit the track, it can pay huge dividends. So like I said before, I'm not an expert, this is just the way I do it and the intervals that I do it in. All you're going to need for this simple service, guys, is a 14mm socket. I always use a socket, just keeps your hands a bit more clearance from the oil itself, and with any luck we'll be able to catch that little sun plug and it won't have to go fishing for it. So it is a messy job. You probably noticed I've changed shirts. That's another tip. Don't wear your best shirts out, guys. No matter how many times you do this, you always seem to get oil on yourself. So yeah, don't wear your best stuff. I'm not going to be wearing gloves. I just can't work in them. I never have worked in gloves, so I don't care about getting a bit of oil on my hands. Another thing you'll probably need that my old man will definitely want me to use is a drop sheet. So that'll prevent any oil hitting the ground. And if you do spill some oil on the ground, guys, make sure you clean it up. Especially if you're out there in the bush, oil is not something that's good for the environment, so make sure you clean up your mess. And let's get into it. First thing you're going to want to do, guys, is just undo the top oil filler cap. This just allows the oil to drain a little bit better. Also, ideally, you'd want to have the engine slightly warm. You don't want it too warm purely because the oil will be bloody too hot, and all the oil filter and parts you need to change will just be too bloody hot. But have it slightly warm just so the oil viscosity is a little bit more runny and it'll drain better and everything will be easy to change. So there's a few little handy tips for you. So we're under the car, guys. We've taken the oil filler cap off the rocker cover, and now we're under the car trying to locate the oil sump. So I've already got something in my eye, so that's awesome. That's another little handy tip. If your car's dirty, so yes, I went through a few mud holes, wear some safety glasses underneath when you're changing the oil, because you will get stuff dropping on your face. I haven't this time, but I wish I did. So I found the oil sump plug, so I'm just going to undo that with that 14mm socket I was talking about before, and I'm going to try to catch the sump plug before it hits the oil pan, and then it'll save me fishing it out later. It'll also make the job a little bit less messy. Also, once you're under the car, there's no getting out once you start doing this process, so make sure you're prepared. You bring your ag. You're going to want to make sure you're on lefty-loosey, not righty-tighty, so I struggle with that quite regularly. Alright, So once you crack it, no oil's going to come out just yet. Still a heap of thread up in there. So what you're going to want to do is grab your rag, wherever I put that, and then just try catch this oil sump before it hits the pan. So here we go. You'll feel the oil thread loosen up, and then the oil should drain straight out, just like that. While I'm here, guys, I'll talk about the little microfiber washer that's on your oil sump plug. Pretty much these things flog out all the time, so it does pay to have spares, but they're only like 5-10 cents a pop, and because they're so cheap, you might as well have a bag of them and change them out every time you do a service. I always have a bag of these little suckers, so you don't actually have to over tighten, because that little washer will squish up as you tighten the plug up. So that's another little handy tip. Always change your little microfiber washer on your sump plug. So while that's draining, I'm going to leave my socket, sump plug, everything down here, and I'm going to go on top of the engine bay now. So while that's draining out, it's a pretty good opportunity to change the air filter. With the oil, you want to drain it, so you're pretty much getting all the oil and residue out of the engine. And if you don't have the engine warmed up, a lot of oil will be thick. The viscosity will be quite thick, and it won't actually drain that well, so you won't get all that dirty oil out, and there will be almost no point in changing the oil at all. So while that happens, we might as well change the air filter. Like I said, guys, we did do the Gibb River Road. I don't normally do this every 5,000k service. I normally do it every 10, but because I've done the Gibb, it was pretty dusty, a lot of bull dust. I'm going to change this, and then if this is looking pretty good, I'm going to keep it as a spare. So to get the case off, all you have to do is there's 4 little securing clips on each side. So I've done this a few times before. That pops off, and then your filter just simply comes out. And if I'm looking at this filter now, obviously you got the clean side, the green side, and then the white side's the dirty side. So give that a quick tap, see how much dirt's actually in it, and if it looked pretty clean, you might as well keep it as a spare, like I said before. So that's another thing too, everyone has preferences between using, you know, genuine parts and non-genuine parts. So for me personally, I don't use genuine parts all the time. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, just depends where I'm actually getting the servicing equipment. And obviously it comes down to price too. So when you're putting in the air filter, make sure you do identify the clean side and the dirty side of your air filter. So obviously the top part's going to be your clean side, and you can actually see if your engine's been getting dusted by having a look inside this case. If there's any sort of dust, it means dust has actually gone through the air filter, and that's not ideal. A few cars that have problems with this is 200 series Landcruisers. Not too sure about the Prados, I haven't had too much issues with these, but yeah, if you don't identify the clean side and the dirty side of your air filter, one, it won't fit properly and you will get dust in. And it's also good to get all the bugs and stuff out of your dirty part. That was a wasp. So, chuck this one in. It's just as simple as that. So there you have it. The air filter is now changed. Simple as that. Now time to change the oil filter on the other side. So that cylinder right there is the oil filter. We're going to change that next. Little tip is make sure you do drain the oil before you take that filter off. Just stop you having a bit of a mess on your hands, that's all I'll say. So once you get the old filter out, dispose of it, because you can't really reuse oil filters. And you grab your new filter, and what you do is you either grab a slight bit of residue from the oil from the old filter, or you get your brand new oil that you're about to tip into the engine, and you just dip your finger in it and coat this little rubber seal and a little bit of oil. What that will do is make sure it seals a lot better than if that was dry. And also when you're putting this new filter back in, make sure you don't over tighten it, because the thread on these filters is very fine and you don't want it cross thread, and you don't want to over tighten these, or you will pull the thread off and you'll be in deep strife. Also, thank yourself next time when you go to service the car, you'll be able to get this filter that you're putting in now off really easily. And to be honest, you don't really need to over tighten these filters. They do have a rubber seal for a reason, so once you compress that little rubber seal down, you're not going to have any leakages anyway. And also the engine's going to get hotter than what it is now, so naturally it will expand and tighten up. So the next step is to screw the new filter in, and then after that we will be putting the sump plug back into the oil sump and then filling up the engine with the new oil. So let's get into that. As you can see here, guys, the oil is pretty much drained, it's just dripping out now. Put the sump plug back in the sump and then pour the new oil straight into the engine. While you're down here, guys, before you put the sump plug back in, if you want to do some preventative maintenance, you can look up inside this sump plug here, and all you'll see is the oil pickup. All it is a little mesh grate, and if it is nice and clean, there's nothing stuck to that mesh grate. It means you're doing your oil changes regularly enough, and also your engine's nice and clean and healthy. So I've just checked mine, it looks pretty good, and yeah, we'll put the plug back in, and we'll go chuck some oil in the engine. So now it's time to put some new oil in the engine. One thing that I will stress the most is that you make sure you actually put that sump plug back in, because a lot of people forget to do it and they just pour engine oil straight into this end and it just comes straight out the other end. So make sure you do put that sump plug back in, guys, and you won't have any trouble in losing oil. One other thing is, with your funnel, make sure it is Schmidt clean. So you don't want any crap particles, sand, dust, anything inside these little funnels, because pretty much if you start pouring oil straight into this, all it'll do is just express route them particles straight into your engine, and obviously your engine doesn't really like particles, sand, all that crap in it. So make sure you do keep your funnel really clean, and when you finish with it, just grab a rag and just stuff it inside the funnel and then in the other end as well, and that'll pretty much keep it clean for you. You won't need to clean it out when you go to use it next, and yeah, it'll be good to store. So let's get the new oil straight into the engine. So guys, while I'm pouring this oil back into the engine, there's a few things I'll talk about. So the first one being how much engine oil your car takes. So you'll need to do some research on this one if you're planning on servicing your own car. Work out how much engine oil your car takes and then buy a drum to suit, essentially. So for me personally, I know the Prado takes 7 litres of engine oil, and luckily enough for me, Penrite also make a 7 litre drum. They also make a 10 litre drum and a 5 litre drum. So to save me buying a 10 and then using 7 and having 3 left over, or me buying a 5 and having to use an extra 2 litres, I just get the 7. It works well for me, it keeps it nice and simple. So one thing I'll also talk about is the viscosity of the oil. So that is referring to the number on the side right here. So I'm using 10W40, and you'll need to do some research on what viscosity engine oil you'll need for your car depending on its age, type, and there's a few other factors as well. So for me personally, it's all preference, and I choose 10W40 and also Penrite. So I'm not saying Penrite is the best engine oil you can get, I'm just saying that's what I like to use. And I like to keep it simple and keep it the same. Every time I service the car, I use this oil every single time. I don't like chopping and changing engine oils. I just know it works well for me, and yeah, it's my choice. So do some research on what engine oil your car takes and what it likes, and yeah, you shouldn't have any issues with that. Anyway, it looks like it's just about drained in now. I've pretty much put the full 7 litres in. However, I know that for a fact that not all 7 litres is going to drain out, so I always leave a tiny little bit inside the drum, and that leaves me room to be able to dip the stick in and see if it's full. If it's not full, I'll empty the rest of the oil back in. If it is full, I'll just leave it as is. So the next step I'm going to do, put the oil cap back on, make sure that's nice and tight, and then go over the whole engine, make sure I've done all the things back up. So pretty much you start the car, you know it's going to run, you know that nothing bad's going to happen. It's worth doing that 5-minute check and going around and making sure you've done everything back up, and it's nice and clean and tidy. Also, a big killer is leaving spanners and stuff inside the engine bay and them getting caught up in the moving parts in the engine. It's a pretty quick disaster, and it's very easy for it to happen. So doing them 5-minute checks, make sure you've got everything done up tight, everything's packed away neatly, and then kick the engine over and see if it runs well. Once I run the engine for 5 minutes, then I'll dip the stick in and I'll check the engine oil volume. So let's get into that. So I've kicked the car over, I've dipped the stick, everything's running smoothly, I've got enough oil in the engine. The next step is to drain that dirty oil that you've just taken out of the engine back into this empty, well now empty, oil container that you've just poured into the engine. So you do that, and then you can drop your oil, your dirty oil, off at any super cheap or Auto One stores. Pretty much you just leave it near their front door and they dispose of it correctly. Definitely do not throw your dirty engine oil in the trash or anything like that. It's pretty bad for the environment if you do that. So the next thing I'll talk about with these specific engines, 1KDs, is preventative maintenance. So me personally, I'm all about preventative maintenance, and it's also why I haven't chipped and tuned this engine, purely because it's done over 200,000 Ks, and reliability is the main thing that myself and Sarah want to achieve, because we are travelling around Australia. So I haven't chipped and tuned this engine. All I've done is put an exhaust through it, obviously have the snorkel as well, and then the only performance thing I've done to it is add that EVC throttle controller. So it's dead stock. So the only thing I've done with this car is clean out the intake manifold. When I bought the car, I'd done roughly 150,000 Ks, so the first thing I did was clean out this intake manifold, and you'd be surprised how much blow-by and soot and crap builds up inside this intake manifold. It was caked to the walls, and it actually chokes the engine out eventually if you don't get it cleaned out. So I've had all this cleaned out. I've had the throttle body cleaned out, and also the EGR valve. So this engine specifically is a 2011 model, so it's pre-DPF, it just has the EGR. I'm not going to tell you to blank the EGR or anything like that. That's totally up to you if you want to do that. I haven't done that, but I've pulled the engine apart myself, so it isn't a massive job to be able to pull all this top intake manifold off and clean it all out. Where it gets really tricky is below the EGR cooler and in the ports. You'd have to strip the whole engine to get to them, so I've only done the top half of the intake manifold. However, if you were to want to do the lower side of it as well, you'd want to book it into a qualified mechanic, because it's a huge job. One other Achilles heel in this specific engine is the injectors. So they're renowned for going after a while, and this car has done 240,000 now on the original injectors. So one thing you can do is go to a mechanic with a scan gauge tool and get him to diagnose, put the diagnostics over your engine, check your injector feedback values. I'm not telling you that these injector feedback values are 100% going to tell you if your injectors are flogged out or if they're good, but they are a pretty good indicator, and they can give you some peace of mind about how good your engine's going, if it's still running healthy, and if you need to change anything before your next trip. So one thing you definitely do not want to do is injectors. They are expensive for these specific car. If you're going to go Denso injectors, you're looking at around 2 or 3 grand to get it done professionally by a mechanic, so that's definitely not that cheap. So it definitely is worth it, paying that $150 for a mechanic to chuck your scan tool over this engine and check your injector feedback values. If you are in the Perth/WA region, I strongly suggest taking your Prado to Aspect Off-Road. They're located just north of Perth, saying they do a lot of Prados and they do a lot of Toyotas. So I always recommend going to them guys. They do a fantastic job. They'll put the diagnostics tool over your engine. They'll be able to give you your feedback values, and they'll be able to run through and explain it to you in terms that you can actually understand. And yeah, you'll have peace of mind if you do that. You'll be able to work out if you need to change anything before your next trip. And I'm personally all about preventative maintenance, and I think that if you are about that, you shouldn't have many issues on the tracks. So that concludes this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I haven't really done many of these servicing/maintenance videos with the Prado, but I hope you learned something from it. These simple 5,000K simple services are really easy to do, and yeah, it can save you a few bob at the shop too. So you're not paying a mechanic to do it, you can do it yourself. I'll be putting up a 10,000K or a major service video soon. Like always, guys, we do have 10% off iTech World products, so if you do want a lithium battery to go under bonnet, I do recommend using iTech World. They are rated under bonnet. I think they are the only manufacturer on the market at the moment that do under bonnet rated lithium batteries. So definitely get onto that, guys. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you do like and subscribe. It goes a long way in helping the channel create more videos like this. And also we do have a Patreon link as well. If you do want to support us further, please hit that link. It goes a long way. We are purchasing new camera gear at the moment with the Patreon's money, so we're putting back into the channel. We want to keep making better videos for you guys. We also want to know what you guys want to see as well. So if there's a specific video you guys want to see us create, let us know in the comments. Don't be scared to comment either. We love comments. We'll always reply to you. So make sure you do that too. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Yo.